next item of business is a debate on disability sport and participation. Can I invite members who wish to speak in the debate to press the request to speak buttons now? And I call on Joe Fitzpatrick to open the debate. Minister, please. Oh, well, Mr Fitzpatrick has undergone some kind of transformation, so I now call on Minister Christina McKelvey to open the debate. Ms McKelvey, please.
A wonderful transformation, obviously, presiding officer. It gives me great pleasure today. I have much more hair anyway. It gives me great pleasure today to open the debate. Tackling inequality is a priority for the Scottish Government, and we have to ensure that disabled people benefit from all that we are doing to improve the lives of everyone in Scotland. That's why the Scottish Government published a Fairer Scotland for Disabled People Disability Action Plan in December 2016. The plan contains 5 longer-term ambitions and includes 93 practical actions the Scottish Government will deliver, which will take us significantly further forward in implementing the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and realising the rights of persons with disabilities. Presiding Officer, we are confident that this will add to the success and prosperity of our communities and of our country. The plan is our commitment to disabled people's rights and contains an ambition around active participation. Presiding Officer, tackling social isolation and loneliness is also a priority and can affect anyone at any stage and any age in their life. It is known that social isolation and loneliness can have a significant impact on a person's physical and mental well-being, which is why we are tackling this issue with a preventative approach, allowing loneliness and social isolation to be treated as a public health issue. However, we understand that disabled people and people with chronic health conditions are at greater risk of social isolation and loneliness than maybe others. The results from the recent Scottish Household Survey on loneliness indicated that people living with a long-term physical or mental health condition are more than twice as likely to experience feelings of loneliness compared to those without. A Connected Scotland, our strategy to tackle social isolation and loneliness, is a step forward in tackling these issues. I recognise that sport has the power to change lives, and we know that being physically active is one of the best things that we can do for our physical and mental health. And I'm very proud that the Scottish Government is determined to create a modern, inclusive Scotland which protects and respects human rights, of which a key element is promoting equal participation and access to sport. There have been a number of high-profile successes in sport for people with disabilities. At the World Para Athletics Championships in Dubai this year, Scotland athletes won 6 medals, and at the World Para Swimming Championships in London, Scottish athletes won 9 medals. So we're going up the medal scale as we go too. In March, the Scottish wheelchair curling team won the silver medal at the Wheelchair Curling Championships held here in Scotland in Stirling. Since 2015, the number of Scottish para-athletes selected onto world-class programmes has increased from 27 to 33, and the number of sports which Scottish para-athletes selected has also increased from 9 to 11. However, Presiding Officer, we know that having a disability at both high performance and grassroots level can still have be a major barrier for many people who want to participate in sport and physical activity. The Scottish Government firmly believes that there should be no barriers to all to participating in sport. Everyone should be able to enjoy sport, whoever they are and whatever their background. And I recognise and look forward to discussing and hearing from others across the Chamber today on how we can do more to remove those barriers that exist so that disabled people have every opportunity to improve their physical and mental well-being and maybe increase that bag of medals too. When I attended the Special Olympics last year, I saw how people of all ages and all backgrounds can change their lives through sport and feel a sense of empowerment supported by sporting organisations across Scotland which provide them with the tools they need to achieve their own personal goals. It's an absolute joy to be amongst it. I was involved in Special Olympics a long time ago myself, but I'll talk about that maybe a bit later. It's through the great work being done by Scottish Disability Sport and highlighting the benefits of getting people participating in sport. It works to coordinate athletes and players of all ages and abilities who have physical, sensory or learning disabilities in the widest possible areas of sport. And SDS works in partnership in order to develop opportunities for disabled people. I would like to take this opportunity, Presiding Officer, to congratulate them on recently winning the Sport Scotland Transforming Coaching Award for its Young Start programme. This is an exciting programme which supports the transitioning of participants on their way to the journey into being coaches. Currently, 79% of the participants have successfully achieved qualifications and are now deployed within the coaching workforce, and this is estimated to have an immediate impact on 1,500 individuals, which is great to hear. I want to take you back a wee bit, Presiding Officer, because whilst we're talking about success and legacy, I want to mention at this point a former colleague of mine that we lost in August this year, Janice Eaglesham. When I first worked with Janice in the very early 90s, I worked with a group of athletes in the learning disability sector, and Janice was not only a brilliant coach, but a fantastic inspiration to everyone around her, and the many people that I worked with went on to run with her club Red Star, many of them getting medals in the Special Olympics and other events. You couldn't keep up with Janice. She was fast at everything and did everything at a pace. And like, she stayed in the next building from me where we lived in Glasgow, and she used to run with her greyhound, and I used to stand at the window and just revel at her. But that was, you know, she gave that type of commitment to everything that she did, and it's absolutely right that she's recognised here in this chamber today. Janice is a great loss to disability sport. She's a great loss to disability sport in Scotland, both national and international, and I hope that the Chamber, as you already have joined me in passing on our condolences to Janice's husband Ian and all her family and friends. He's a renowned athlete and sports coach himself, so I would hope that the Chamber would be happy to do that today, and by your applause I can see you are. She touched many lives. I would like to Presiding Officer, to move on to some of the issues around about equality. The Scottish Government works closely with Sport Scotland on equality within sport. Sport Scotland's new corporate strategy, Sport for Life, outlines the vision for an active Scotland where everyone benefits from sport and the inclusion underpins everything that they do. The new inclusion principle underpins the commitment to show greater leadership, to influence and drive the changes needed to address inequalities and ensure everyone has that opportunity to get involved in a sport that they love. The sport and physical activity sector must recognise and understand that each individual has a specific range of different characteristics and complexities, and if we are to effectively address issues that may be preventing or constraining people from getting involved and progressing in any aspect of sport or physical activity. So really focused, person-centred approach. But I want to emphasise that for our part, the Scottish Government is committed to supporting equalities in Scottish sport, ensuring that people of all ages and from all communities across Scotland have the opportunity to participate in sport and physical activity. Extra funds have been distributed by Sport Scotland to help meet the Scottish Government's priorities on reducing those inequalities in sports participation we have just spoken about. For example, the First Minister opened the National Sports Training Centre in Inverclyde in 2017, the first sports training centre of its kind in the UK. Oh, what Janice Eaglesham and I could have done with that in the early 90s, but we still did great work anyway. The state-of-the-art residential facility is designed with inclusivity in mind for disabled sports users, both performance and community users, and will ensure Scotland is even better placed to support our disabled athletes in their preparations and to help to ensure sport and activity is absolutely accessible. Sport Scotland is also working with governing bodies to improve access to information and sporting opportunities for BSL users. They have started this process with consultation at the recent Sport Scotland Equalities and Inclusion Conference to establish the needs of sports governing bodies to improve their work in this area. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, I would like to recognise the good work going on across the whole country to create opportunities for disabled people to engage and participate in sport. However, there's always more to be done. And at this point, I'd like to congratulate and recognise the work of Stephen, the McGee brothers, who are absolute international world leaders in boccia and have got many medals to their cash. Local constituents of mine, and always proud to meet them out and about when they're showing me their next round of medals that they've got. But Presiding Officer, finally, I would like to welcome the support from across this chamber today, because I think as we examine on new and innovative ways of developing and enhancing disability in sport in this country, learning lessons from global best practice and creating an environment where disabled people can excel and harness the mental and physical benefits of participating in sport can bring. And my goodness, that will push us all up those medal tables. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. I call on Brian Whittle to open for the Conservatives. Mr Whittle, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I start by declaring an interest that I am a coach, including to athletes designated with a disability. I am obviously delighted to open this debate on behalf of the Scottish Conservatives, given the topic, and I'd like to start by associating myself and my party to Christine McKelvey's comments on Janice Eaglesham. I was at her funeral. I have some athletes that worked with Janice. I was at her funeral. For the size of the congregation and the outpouring of love for her and Ian would tell you everything you ever needed to know about Janice. And as you will know, Ms McKelvey, if Janice wanted something, there's not much point turning her down. Just accept it early on. It saved you an awful lot of time because she's getting what she wanted. She was an incredible woman and sadly missed by that whole community. Now, I would start, Presiding Officer, by noting that I do not like the title, Disability Sport. Can we please just accept that it's just sport? All the same rules and benefits apply, like positively affecting physical and mental health, inclusivity and education. These may be felt more acutely in this community given the increased barriers to participation, but we could be discussing access to sport from any demographic. Sport allows for that development of self-awareness, of discipline, of teamworking, of resilience and confidence, the greater understanding of diet and nutrition, and tackling directly that scourge of isolation. I think if we are serious about closing the attainment gap, for example, we need to recognise the crucial impact that activities such as sport can have on learning. And I've spoken about the skills learned outside of the classroom being crucial to learning inside the classroom. However, I think the simple truth is that participation still relies far too heavily on the financial status of parents. Sport in general, I think, is becoming the bastion of the middle class, and this is starkly obvious within the disability community. Disabled people in Scotland are far less likely than non-disabled people to participate in sport. The overall picture is that those with a disability are less active across the board, have poorer experiences with school PE, and are therefore less likely to participate in sport as adults. To many school pupils with a disability, sitting at the side of PE lessons because either their teacher is unsure of how to include them or the facilities to enable their inclusion are not available. If we throw in rurality or deprivation into the equation, there is a further huge drop-off in participation and opportunities to participate, felt even more acutely in the disability community. If I may, Deputy Presiding Officer, I want to highlight a few examples. I have spoken about the power chair footballers many times in this chamber and how they humiliated the parliamentary team. Totally humiliated the parliamentary team 6-0 in a 10-minute demonstration game during the Scottish Championships. To this day, Alexander Stewart remains traumatised. When he left the park, it took about 10 minutes before we could even get him to blink. Of course, this demonstrates that no matter what the sport, if you don't practice, you will get easily beaten by those who are committed and do train regularly. The Ayrshire Tigers are my home team, and I have had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time with them and have even hosted them here in Parliament. They say that transport and cost is preventing the expansion of the team to include all of those who would want to participate, and that these issues actually threaten their very existence. They get together and train and play several times a week. Now, how would they replace that inclusion and that participation, which is so crucial, as Christine McKelvey has mentioned, to their health and well-being if the club wasn't there? And there's disability motorsport, giving the chance to a section of the community normally overlooked to charge around in a race-prepared sports car. I have been driven round in this car, and believe me, Deputy Presiding Officer, there is no chance you would be dozing off. Is that unique experience, that the camaraderie, the fact that people are prepared to recognise them as part of a community that is so vital for anybody, really. I know that once again the voluntary service is under threat due to finance, and I know it takes about £40,000 a year to keep that car running and get access to the racetrack. And finally, I coach a young man who has learning disabilities, which is why I know Janice Eaglesham so well. He has amazing foster carers who go way beyond an extra mile to ensure he and others in their care miss out on nothing. He went to European Championships last year in Paris and came away with a bronze. He qualified for the World Championships this year, but could not go because of finance. The championships were in Australia. But I have watched this young man develop in stature and in confidence over the last few years to a point where he is now at college and he's out living on his own with the continued support of his foster carers. Just for the record, Deputy Presiding Officer, he runs 23 seconds for 200 metres. So he is very impressive. He's just a big ball of fast-twitch fibres. Presiding Officer, where would he be without that opportunity to train with a squad of athletes and be treated exactly the same as everybody else? Then to travel abroad to represent his country. It is that kind of approach I think we need to embrace to make sure there is that opportunity, no matter what the barriers. Allow them to achieve with all the confidence and resilience his participation has taught him, for him to become that contributor to the society. What is the alternative for these sports participants? Is it a lifetime of care or of welfare, of seclusion and isolation? What would be the cost of that pathway, both financially and, more importantly, to the personal well-being and quality of their lives? I would suggest to you it would be much greater downstream. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government spend the best part of £18 billion on health and education, but only spend £40 million or so on sport. And I think given there's an agreement across the Chamber of the huge benefits sport and activity can bring to health and education, how sport can open up a whole new world of opportunity, isn't it about time we got serious about it and really properly funded it? Now, I recognise the world of sport can be daunting to some people, but let's start talking about it from a health and well-being perspective. We are talking about the preventable health agenda once again, and this is we're talking about today in its most raw form. Nowhere else could it be more aptly demonstrated than within disability sport. Inclusion, camaraderie, confidence, resilience, achievement, physical and mental health. Surely this kind of investment has to be an easy ask. Presiding Officer, I'm going to finish by mentioning a young athlete from my area who was Kaylee Hagel, who won the 100-metre race running gold and ran a world record at the World Para Athletics Championships in Dubai. She is an incredible athlete who has also excelled in the swimming pool. And although sport is primarily not about medals and international vests, it is great for youngsters to see what is possible. Just that ability to participate, Deputy Presiding Officer, surely that has to be within our gift, Deputy Presiding Officer.
Thank you very much. And I call on Mary Fee to open for Labour. Ms Fee, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. As Scottish Labour's spokesperson for Sport and Equalities, I am delighted to have the opportunity to speak in today's important debate on disability, sport and participation. Tuesday, the 3rd of December, was International Day of People with Disabilities and Purple Light Up Day, a global movement designed to draw attention to the economic empowerment of disabled people. Empowering disabled people must be at the heart of issues such as improving participation in sport. And Scotland is fortunate to have many leading athletes and sportspeople of all abilities, and we must always take the time to recognise the successes of disabled and able-bodied athletes equally. And I'm sure everyone in the Chamber will agree with me that elite Scottish sporting role models should be representative of all backgrounds. And there are two conflicting themes in today's debate. Those are championing the successes in disabled sport, whilst also reflecting on the low levels of participation across the disabled population and the challenges that continue to prevent participation. And it is evident that sport can have a significant impact on the life of a person with a disability, no matter how complex that disability may be. There are a wide range of sports and activities on offer for disabled people, and I have been fortunate to meet representatives from a few of those. I met Ryan Galloway, the Honorary Secretary of the Scottish Power Chair Football Association, when they were recently here in Parliament. And along with the Scotland Power Chair Football National Team, there are 9 teams involved in the Power Chair Football League, each run entirely by volunteers, relying on funding, on donations and on sponsorship. And asking Ryan what challenges he faces with running this league, he stated that Changing Places toilet facilities are at the top of the list, both at venues and at service stations, when players are travelling across Scotland. And colleagues across the chamber will know that changing places toilets are something that both myself and Jeremy Balfour have campaigned to increase the availability of. There are many voluntary groups working to support disabled people in sport. And the Riding for the Disabled Association is dedicated to improving the lives of people with disabilities through the provision of horse riding, with hippotherapy and with carriage driving. And with the help of over 150 volunteers, the Riding for the Disabled Glasgow group offers 47 hours of classes per week, providing opportunities for therapy, for achievement and for enjoyment, for improving health, well-being and self-confidence, and benefiting both mobility and coordination. And Disability Snow Sport UK believe that taking part in adaptive snow sport has the power to transform a person's relationship with their disability. And they are committed to enabling all people to participate in snow sport, regardless of disability, of injury or of experience. And in the new year, I will be meeting with Sean and Kieran from DS UK at Braehead to see firsthand the activities on offer and hear about the challenges they face. And as far as I am aware, I am also going to have the opportunity to participate. Unfortunately, there are a range of barriers that disabled people have to overcome when participating in sport, which helps to explain why only 20% of the disabled population meet the recommendation level of physical activity. And this is far short of the 52% level of non-disabled people. And Scottish Disability Sport reveal that almost half of disabled people fear they would lose benefits if they are seen to be physically active. And this is a major barrier and clearly a sign that our welfare system is failing disabled people. And Presiding Officer, I recently met Kyle Anderson, a pupil from Lasswade High School, who told me of the work his school does in supporting young people with disabilities. They have a unit at the school called the Pod, which currently supports 14 full-time and 3 part-time pupils with a range of disabilities. And the Pod works closely with the main school, and pupils, including Kyle, participate in a PE class with the Pod pupils. Sports include touch rugby and football, with the shared classes building confidence and social skills, and more importantly, breaking down barriers. And it's become a highlight of the week for both the Pod and for the mainstream pupils. And I'm sure everyone in the chamber will agree with me that this initiative and the work that pupils like Kyle and Lasswade School do is an example of good practice that could be replicated right across Scotland. And Presiding Officer, to close, I'd like to finish with a quote from a disability campaigner, Mary Ellen McCavert, that I think we should remember when discussing any issue relating to disabled people. Disability has many faces. Each of these faces tells unique human stories that are equally valid. Yet, as we are entering a new decade, we carry into it the same challenges as before. The United Nations declared 1981 as the Year of Persons with Disabilities. Yet, 38 years later, we still don't have full participation or equality. I cannot wait for the day disability is just seen as another notch on the spectrum of diversity, something that doesn't need a day to celebrate it because it's as normal is. Yet that will not be possible until we have a world that is accessible for all. We risk erasing disability identity when we focus on ability alone, because then we erase the inevitable challenges of living in a world that was not built for us. If we don't lean into our limitations caused by our disabilities, our requests for access might not be heard. Obtaining that very access to our world, which will demonstrate then allow us to demonstrate our vast abilities on an even playing field. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call on Alison Johnson, to from the Green Party. Ms Johnson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I was pleased to see just last Sunday in my own region of Lothian, Edinburgh University Volleyball Club host a low-intensity sports event at the Pleasance Sports Centre, not far from Parliament. The event was aimed at people with barriers to engaging in sport and physical activity, including disabled people. And students and members of the local community were able to try boccia, sitting volleyball and sitting netball. I think boccia has been mentioned already in this debate, and I'm sure Mr Whittle will remember the evening where he and we mistakenly thought that we were challenging the excellent Stephen Maguire in the garden lobby. Mr Whittle and I can tend to over-competitiveness on occasion, Presiding Officer, and each time Stephen Maguire, each time we competed with him, he let us believe for a few seconds at least that we were about to beat him, until he threw the final ball, and always his skill shone through and we were put firmly in our places. You know, it was just a fabulous introduction to that game, which is gaining in popularity. And I suppose the essence of the debate we're having this afternoon is the fact that we want each and every person to have that opportunity to take part in the thing that inspires them. So I think we've all agreed that we need to do more to ensure that disabled people, that all people have full opportunity to take part in sport. Because a report for the Scottish Government by the University of Edinburgh's Professor Grant Jarvie shows that only 20% of disabled people take the recommended level of physical activity, compared to 52% of non-disabled people. So there's work to do in both regards, but clearly 1 in 5 disabled people, it's not good enough, and we can do more. Because, you know, conversely, we found out that when disabled people do take part in sport, research shows that they're almost as likely to take part frequently, more than 15 days a month, than non-disabled people. So it's really important that we break down those initial barriers to participation. And I think, you know, Mary Fee has spoken of the barrier around changing places and access in the first instance, and access to toilets and changing places. And I think that is key. I was pleased in the planning bill to have an amendment passed that makes sure that local planning authorities have to account for the provision of toilets, because we've discussed this more widely in the Chamber, and it is an issue. It affects people wondering whether or not they can get out and about. And any barrier there leads to social isolation. So I think accessible venues with the appropriate facilities and equipment, that's vital. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity to debate the incredible development of power chair football in Scotland. That is another sport that's developing rapidly, but that lack of basic facilities means that only a few sports centres across the country at the moment are able to hold those events. And I know when we had the opportunity to meet with those participating very recently, it was having a profoundly positive impact on their lives. From my own experience in athletics, I know that ensuring coaches have the appropriate skills and understanding is hugely important. And I congratulate Sports Scotland on the work it's doing to ensure that coaches are supported to coach people with particular requirements. And I think today's debate gives us an opportunity to discuss both the challenges facing disabled people participating in sport, but also to celebrate the progress that is being made and the incredible achievements of Scottish athletes and players. I mean, 2019, it's already been mentioned, we have seen some outstanding performances. Christina McKelvey, I would actually like at this point too to associate myself with the comments the Minister made about Janice Eaglesham. I mean, absolutely a huge loss, but you know, what a contribution to the lives of so many people in this country. But yeah, the Peak Sports Centre hosted the largest wheelchair curling event outside the Winter Paralympics when the World Championships came to Stirling. 12 nations took part. Scotland put in a very impressive performance to become silver medalists, just behind the champions, China. In October, Alan Ritchie won the bronze medal on day 2 of this year's World Shooting Parasport Championships in Sydney. And Sam Fernando of Fife Athletics Clubs won a silver medal in the 3,000-metre steeplechase at the Brisbane INES Global Games for athletes with an intellectual disability. And just last month, Scottish athletes took an incredible 7 medals at the World Para-Athletic World Championships, including golds in the T35 100 and 200 for the incredible Maria Lyle, and a tremendous double gold and 2 new world records for Scottish race runners, already mentioned by Mr Whittle, Kayleigh Hago and Gavin Drysdale. Now, anyone that's had the pleasure and privilege of meeting these young people will know, just how formidable they are, both in their competition and in the effort they put into all aspects of their life. I had the pleasure of meeting Gavin Drysdale in Parliament here, and I think at that point we were discussing his preparation for his hires. So, these are young people who are succeeding in so many ways. We've had Gordon Reid, the wheelchair tennis player from Alexandria. He reached the French Open singles final and the doubles semi-finals of the Australian and French Open. I think, Kayleigh and Gavin were 2 of 6 contenders for the Para Athlete of the Year award at Scottish Athletics' recent awards. And I think one thing that really struck me is at those awards was that both the Para-Athlete and the Athlete of the Year award were on the stage at the same time. They were awarded together. It's really a great effort to ensure there is that inclusivity. So as well as celebrating, we need to look at what's being done at all levels to expand opportunities for disabled people to participate in sport. We've got the Sport Scotland app in partnership with Scottish Disability Sport, and that helps coaches access video training, and it helps them to support the athletes that they are coaching. And I think ensuring, I'm conscious of time, presiding officer, so you will let me know when I need to wrap up, but I think ensuring...
I always do that, so you're absolutely fine.
Thank you. I think ensuring that disabled people themselves can become coaches is hugely important. The Inclusive Coach project, funded by Sport Scotland, matches potential disabled coaches with a mentor who meets them regularly to help identify their strengths and areas that they may need to develop. But despite that, we've still got too few disabled coaches, around 7% compared to the 1 in 5 Scots who are disabled. And I look forward to hearing suggestions from the Minister about what else can be done to support disabled coaches. And I think Mary Fee and others have commented on the need to ensure that we remove financial barriers. I mean, these affect everyone, not just people with disabilities, but we know that disabled people are more likely to be in poverty than non-disabled people, and transport costs to training and to fixtures can be absolutely prohibitive. I was saddened to hear Mr Whittle's example of a talented athlete who was unable to take advantage of a fabulous representative opportunity overseas because of lack of finance. So that's another area that we need to address. I mean, for power chair football, I believe it can cost as much as £1,500 to put on a taster day. So that's clearly a barrier to the development of new sports. A Fairer Scotland for Disabled People is the Scottish Government's action plan to deliver on the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And the plan pledges that, to quote, disabled people's participation at all levels of sport and physical activity will increase through an action plan developed in partnership with disabled people through a new equality in physical activity and sport forum by 2019. So 3 years on from that plan, I'd welcome an update on progress from the Minister, and also just an update on how disabled people's participation and sport and physical activity is being measured so that we can tell what progress is being made. But to close, presiding officer, it's heartening to see so much positive growth and achievement in disability sports in Scotland, but we still need to do more to ensure we remove any barriers remaining. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Mike Rumbles, Mr Rumbles, to open with Liberal Democrats. Mr Rumbles, please. There's a little time in hand, so as you can see, I'm being generous today.
Well, Deputy Presiding Officer...
Enjoy it, Mr Rumbles.
After Tuesday, when I prepared a 6-minute speech and without notice told it was 4 minutes, I'm now facing the opposite situation, but I will speak to what I've prepared. Thank you very much indeed. Like other speakers this afternoon, the Liberal Democrats believe that everyone should have the chance to realise the benefits of participating in sport and living more active lifestyles. Active lifestyles help improve quality of life in later years, reduces mental health risks, increases overall health, and indeed increases people's employability. And it's good to see the debate in such consensus breaking out this afternoon. Back in 2016, the Scottish Liberal Democrats said that the Scottish Government should develop a long-term strategy to give access for all to opportunities which are appropriate for their ability and commitment to sport, whilst particularly recognising that funding should be available for talented individuals to achieve their potential. We suggested that funding to support growth in sport and physical activity could come from healthy eating initiatives such as a sugar tax, for instance, while we said that we would protect sports and arts funding through the National Lottery. It's also vital to recognise the role that teachers and schools play in promoting access to sport, and we also want to support carers by providing free community benefits such as free passes to leisure centres. Since the present government came to power, annual investment in Paralympic sports has indeed risen, and there has been investment in Scottish disability sport. So I'm very happy this afternoon to give credit where credit is due, and it is due here. Scottish Disability Sport reports that participants and performers with a disability still experience, though, the lowest participation levels in sport and physical activity. It's widely recognised that there's a lag between the philosophy of inclusion, and we've heard about the philosophy of inclusion already, for people with a disability in physical activity and sport in current practice. It isn't really surprising, as Mary Fee and Alison Johnson highlighted, to see that only 20% of people with disabilities take the recommended level of physical activity compared with the 52% of non-disabled people. And I make no excuse for repeating these statistics, because they are indeed stark statistics, and we shouldn't rest until this activity gap is closed. Interestingly enough, Disability Sport also report that almost half of disabled people, 47%, fear losing their benefits if they are seen to be physically active. And what a disincentive that is, to have that perception that they're worried, half are worried about engaging in sport because they might lose their benefits. Presiding Officer, it's vital that we listen to disabled people and involve them in the development of sporting activities. Training and education has the potential to address many of the issues around access to sport and physical activities in general. It helps in the raising of awareness of access, attitudes and assumptions. In our view, it's essential to show disabled people participating in non-elite and non-competitive sports, dare I say it, in ordinary sporting and physical activities, as well as what we see so often on TV, the elite activities of the disabled too. And I'd like to end by echoing Brian Whittle's and Mary Fee's sentiments, that wouldn't it be better to get to a situation, eventually, where we debate sports integration for everyone, rather than highlight disability. And I look forward to the time we get to that position.
Thank you very much. And I call Joe McAlpine to be followed by Tom Mason. Ms McAlpine, please.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. We can all take great pride in the achievements of our athletes here in Scotland and the records that they continue to break. But it's particularly inspiring to celebrate the achievements of people who break these records and have these sporting achievements despite living with a disability. I'm especially proud of a record-breaking wheelchair racer from my constituency in the south of Scotland, Shelby Watson. At just 17, Shelby set world records at the 2015 Cerebral Palsy International Sports and Recreation Association World Games in the 400 and 1500 metre events, and she broke the European 100 metres record as well. Shelby was born with cerebral palsy, which means she cannot walk and has other disabilities, and despite this she trains twice every day, as well as undergoing a college course, a full-time college course in childcare. She's a truly inspirational young woman. There are clear barriers to participation in sport for those who have disabilities. These include physical accessibility and a lack of inclusion. A fifth of the Scottish population, we shouldn't forget, have a disability, but only a fifth of those with disabilities take on the recommended level of activity. Yet 7 out of 10 disabled people want to take part in more sport and physical activity. Only 1 in 4 clubs in the UK thinks it has appropriate facilities for disabled people to participate, adequately trained staff and suitable equipment. This means that 3/4 of clubs need some kind of additional support. This can contribute to the isolation of disabled people and limit their chances to pursue a healthy lifestyle. Scottish disability sport, as others have said, has played an integral part in the development of inclusive sport here in Scotland. Their volunteers and staff work hand in hand with local authorities and leisure trusts to deliver the social, mental and physical benefits of activity and sport, which are so important to individuals with disabilities, indeed to all of us. Working with local partnerships has enabled 345 children to receive inclusive sports coaching in the last year, and over 200 new entrants in the sport of boccia in the last 2 years. The South of Scotland is home to a very active disability sport network. In March, Dumfries and Galloway coaches and athletes took part in the Special Olympics World Summer Games in Abu Dhabi. This was the first time any athletes or coaches from Dumfries and Galloway were chosen to be part of the GB World Games team, and they were all immensely proud to be there. Dumfries and Galloway Disability Sport have entered a team to take part in the 2020 Special Olympics GB National Alpine Skiing Championships taking place in Switzerland in early February. The team of 4 skiers, accompanied by 3 coaches, will compete at these games for the first time in a Special Olympics Winter Games. Having only started skiing earlier this year, the athletes have been training arduously on the dry ski slope in Carlisle. The group has made tremendous progress in a short period of time, with them taking part in their first competition in June this year. Already they are prepared to take the next step and compete in the slalom and giant slalom events in Switzerland next year. In June, Dumfries and Galloway Disability Sport will host the Dumfries and Galloway Special Olympics mini-games, which will include swimming, boccia and table tennis. This is a regional competition sanctioned by Special Olympics GB and sits within the competition advancement pathway. Participation makes athletes eligible to advance to the Special Olympics GB national level of competition in that sport. It's a great opportunity for athletes to compete and to progress in their sport. Just last month, the World Paralympics Championship took place in Dubai, and Scotland has 7 athletes represent Great Britain in the event, producing a host of awe-inspiring performances. There was an astounding double gold and 2 new world records for Scottish race runners Kaylee Hago and Gavin Drysdale. In Scotland, the 4-year Get Out, Get Active programme received $376,000 in funding. Due to the outstanding success of this programme, funding will be extended for an additional 4 years, and over 8,000 disabled people across the UK are already participating. Improvements to accessibility of sport in Scotland continue to be made. Between 2017 and 2018, 22 national events were organised across 7 sports. 5 regional parasport festivals took place with over 300 athletes participating. More than 100 individuals across 13 sports were newly introduced. 14 education and training opportunities took place in the sports of canoeing, goalball, boccia and swimming courses, with over 300 coaches and volunteers benefiting. We must continue to ensure that everyone in Scotland, irrespective of their background, is able to fully participate in society and in sport. Our success as a nation relies on creating a society where obstacles to opportunity are eradicated to allow the people of Scotland to achieve their potential. And that should be all the people of Scotland without any limitations at all. And I would like to finish by congratulating again all the inspiring people in this area of sport who have done so much to make our country proud of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McAlpine. I call Tom Mason to be followed by Fulton McGregor. Mr Mason, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Today's debate is one that I'm glad to speak in, having some considerable experience over my 76 years in a fair few of the challenges, almost 77, and that have been discussed so far. It goes without saying that access to sport and exercise is vital for the health of everybody in Scotland. And when there is a group in society that are unable to fully benefit from sport, then we need to consider what action we can take to improve the situation. This is the case for disabled people for a number of different reasons. It can be physical accessibility, it can be personal or social attitudes, but whatever the reason, we can and must do better as a nation. Now, for most of my life, my participation in sport has been impacted by disability. Some sports are easier to adapt to, others more challenging. Playing croquet, for instance, is less challenging than my other favourite pursuit, sailing. Even then, there has been support available through the charity Sailability Scotland, and I want to take a moment to highlight their great work as an example to the Chamber. Working with the Royal Yachting Association, of which I'm a member, and the Scottish Disability Sport, Sailability works with sailing clubs and centres to promote sailing for all those with any form of physical, sensory or learning disability. This can mean helping with the setting up of new disabled-friendly sailing clubs or working with existing ones to adapt their existing practices. It can mean maintaining a fleet of boats that are suitable for disabled people to use, or organising competitive racing events for disabled people. This work has been made possible for hundreds of disabled sailors to enjoy quality time on the water, and I've played an instrumental role in getting disabled people involved in sailing since their founding in 1992. And a big part of how they do that is through adapting existing practices to support those who aren't able to benefit from them. Without my left hand, it could be difficult to manoeuvre a boat and pull the necessary ropes at the right time. But by changing the way that the system works, I've been able to get exactly the same speed as my competitors, and I often won. Although this does sometimes involve holding a rope with my teeth, which can be quite uncomfortable. This is a principle that can be applied to a great many different sports. For them, it is not entirely new kit that is needed, but changes to existing equipment can make the difference in bringing sport to a completely new group of players. Now, as I'm sure everybody has, I have received some excellent submissions from third-party organisations in the run-up to this afternoon's debate, and I'm grateful to each of them for their thoughts. Scottish Disability Sport have been instrumental in driving up engagement and the participation in disability sport, and I'm particularly impressed by their commitment to deliver disability inclusion training to coaches across the country. With more than 100 such programmes involving 1,600 candidates in the last year alone, as well as working with 15 universities to improve access to sport, I am sure inclusion will be at the forefront of their work in the years ahead. I'm encouraged too by Sports Scotland's outline of their financial contribution. They are continuing to make the Scottish disability sport to the tune of more than, they're continuing to support the Scottish disability sport to the tune of more than £500,000 per year and almost £2.5 million over 4 years. This is in addition to their active schools programme and direct club investment. It's exactly the kind of work that we should celebrate. Lastly, I want to recognise the SFA, who have been working to develop para-football since the launching of their first strategy in 2012. This has made a clear difference, going from one disability-friendly competition to 14 in the space of 7 years. This, in turn, has enabled more than 7,000 participants to enjoy their sport and 6,000 coaches to be educated in disability inclusion. Deputy Presiding Officer, in Scotland today, it is estimated that 1 in 5 people have some kind of disability, approximately 1 million people. And we know that disabled people in Scotland are far less likely to participate in sport than non-disabled people. We know the devastating impact that the lack of exercise can have on health of people across the country, and it's no less true of people with disability. Without any prospect of getting out and enjoying physical activity, it is all too easy for the rut to set in. And by the time one reaches middle age, it is a real struggle to break from such a downward spiral. So whenever negative attitudes about disabled sports rear their heads, just show them footage of our athletes in the Paralympic Games, breaking records and inspiring a new generation. If accessibility is the problem, let's see how we can work with clubs to help them bring their sport to more people in their communities. And let's look at starting the process as early as possible, developing pathways from schools and communities into competitive sport. We take great pride in ours being an inclusive society for disabled people. It is undoubtedly true there has been massive improvement in recent years. However, access to sport still lags stubbornly behind in this regard, and more must be done. There are so many fantastic role models for disabled people when taking up sport. We only need to glance at some of the performances at the Paralympics to tell us that. So let's work together in opening new pathways to sport for disabled people and encourage them to get involved in any opportunity. With the right support and equality of opportunity, there is nothing we cannot do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I call Fulton McGregor to be followed by Jackie Bailey.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As someone who believes in the benefits of sport and physical activity, it is an honour to speak in this debate today. And regardless of geography, social background, or whether someone has a disability or not, I firmly believe that everyone should be able to enjoy sport equally. And I know this sentiment is reflected in the Scottish Government policy and has already been outlined by the Minister today. And to go over a few of the things that the Scottish Government, the steps that the Scottish Government has taken in broadening sport and engagement. Again, 2 years ago, the First Minister opened the first inclusive sports training centre in Inverclyde. The Scottish Government has increased Sport Scotland's core funding by £2 million in 2018-19 for the development of sport within Scotland. And the Scottish Government has also pledged to underwrite any potential shortfall in the National Lottery funding for Sport Scotland of up to £3.4 million. And I think that the nature of this role in relationship of the funding between the Scottish Government and Sport Scotland is critical for the development of disability sports in our nation and making sure that there are opportunities for participation for all. And as the MSPs, I certainly get to see some of the work that Sport Scotland do in our schools, for example, in our local constituencies in this area, in broadening sport for all members of society. Presiding Officer, other members have already talked about examples of where there is good practice in disability sports across the country. And as is customary, I'd like to focus on some of these within my own constituency. I'll start with the North Lanarkshire figure skating based at the Time Capsule in Coatbridge. Pardon me. North Lanarkshire figure skating is an inclusive club with members who have additional support needs. Members and their parents report to see a massive difference in their social and physical activity, which is such an amazing impact on the trajectory of their life. This is reports from parents and children who use that club. Some of these members actually went on to compete in the Special Olympics and some won gold medals in Vienna. And I'm told that one of the coaches, and to name dropper, Rebecca, taught the children and trained alongside with them, thus demonstrating the positive impact that North Lanarkshire figure skating has on our skaters and the community as a whole. The club and sport help to relieve all worries and anxiety, not only for the skaters, but also worries and anxieties that their families may have, and act as a safe haven for all members. Now, Presiding Officer, this club actually recently contacted me and my neighbouring colleague, Alex Neil, just about a week ago with regards to a 200% rise in rent since the club was founded in 2008. Initially, the club were charged £40 per hour for the ice rink at the Time Capsule, and this has now increased to a whopping £149 an hour. And this is obviously putting pressure on the club, which is the reason why they've written to us, and in many of the families who participate actually leading to a dropout, and it's something that's been so successful as well. So today, for the record, I'll make it clear to the club that Alex Neil and I will be writing to NL Leisure to ask that this situation is resolved, to allow a continuation of this inclusive club and the success that it's had since 2008. The Time Capsule Leisure Centre, staying there just now, also hosts NL's inclusive skating for those with any type of impairment. And this programme is also flourishing with over 30 families registered. And the Monklands Disabled Swimming Club, who meet weekly, are thriving and are always looking for new participants. So there's a lot going on, even within the Time Capsule itself. I've spoke about another group in Coatbridge in this chamber many times before, the Shining Stars, who do some amazing work. Its founder, Katie Slavin, does some amazing work with children and young people with complex additional needs. And this actually includes individual PT sessions, kickboxing, sensory circuits, and all from a qualified trainer. So absolutely fantastic work. And I know that the Minister is still considering fitting in a visit to the Shining Stars, so I'll make mention of that again, because I think the group would really appreciate that, and I know that the Minister is keen to do that. Presiding Officer, although there are countless specific sports we can focus on, and I could certainly have made mention of many more examples in Coatbridge and Christen alone, I do want to briefly talk about football, as I'm the convener of the cross-party group in the future of football in Scotland, and I'd like to thank the SFA for the briefing that they sent us out, that sent members out. The SFA have invested heavily in both identifying and catering to the need of disabled athletes. Since 2012, the SFA have educated over 6,000 coaches on the challenges and the support needs for para-athletes, and the investment has seen the rate of players multiply from 1,000 to 7,000 in just an 8-year period. In the same time scale, the SFA have gone from hosting 1 disabled-friendly tournament annually to 14. Still not enough, but definitely a massive improvement. In fact, the rapid rise in participants of the various versions of football in Scotland culminated in the founding of the Scottish Para-Football National Association last August, the world's first para-football affiliated national organisation, something that we can all be proud of in the Chamber. In October, along with many of my colleagues, and I think it's been mentioned already, I spoke with Willie Pettigrew of the Scottish Power Football Association when he visited the Parliament and had the exhibition in the Garden Lobby. And he told me how Power Chair football had helped to reduce his isolation, improve mental well-being, and how it builds the self-confidence of players. And as others have mentioned, I think Mary Fee mentioned it in her speech, I was alerted at that point to the concern that Power Chair players are still having with access to toilets, particularly in older facilities up and down the country. And of course we know that this would not solely apply to Power Chair players, but to those who play other sports as well. And I would urge the Government, as well as Sports Scotland, local authorities and other stakeholders to consider what renovations may be required in some of these older buildings. And I think as constituency MSPs, we can all think of particular buildings in our own areas where that may be the case. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, we can be proud that Scotland is home to many of the most inclusive sporting projects in the world. We boast huge successes in the para-sports with world champions in tennis, discus and sprinting, to name but a few. If we want to be a truly equal society, though, we must do more, and I think everybody said that. We must encourage disability sports to continue to flourish in equal terms, as well as listening to the needs of those who are involved at a grassroots level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I call Jackie Bailey to be followed by Jenny Gilruth. Jackie Bailey.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Let me start by declaring an interest. I'm the Honorary President of the Dumbartonshire Disability Sports Club and have been since 2013. I intend to therefore be unashamedly parochial, as I think the model developed in Dumbartonshire has a lot to commend itself to other areas. Now, I know others have talked about elite athletes, and it's right to praise their achievements, but I want to talk about the young disabled people in my area. Let me take you back to 2009, when Tommy Orisma, Football Development Officer at West Dumbartonshire Council, was taking a group of young disabled people and their parents to a game of football in Falkirk. Why Falkirk? I don't know. But during the journey, the parents spoke about the very few opportunities there were for children and young people with additional support needs to participate in sport, particularly after school hours. As a result of that feedback, 3 public meetings were organised. 135 people from across the local disability community in West Dumbartonshire came along to discuss exactly that, the lack of physical activity opportunities for children and young people with additional support needs. The decision was taken then and there to create a volunteer-led disability sports club, and it was unanimously agreed. And so the Dumbartonshire Disability Sports Club was born, holding its first multi-sport session in March 2010, with around then 27 children and young people with additional support needs in attendance. During the past 10 years, the club has expanded its activities, starting with 1 multi-sport session per week. They're currently delivering 5 physical activity sessions per week for 56 members. The club works in partnership with West Dumbartonshire Leisure Trust, the council, local sports clubs, Children in Need, Share Care Scotland, Big Lottery and STV to create club activities such as swimming, football, multi-sports, residential sports camp and the Disability Sport Youth Group. And new activities are evolving all the time. But during one of the residential sports camps, parents' health was raised, and the club acted and started a parents group. Since 2017, the club now provides weekly spin classes, massage and fitness classes for parents and carers affected by disability. So they've taken a very holistic approach. The unexpected benefit of the club has been the connections and support groups created by the families over those years. Families brought together by the club go on holiday together. They take the children on social outings together. And importantly, they're able to talk to other parents in a similar situation about their challenges and about how they cope. Let me tell you about the impact that the club makes in the words of two mums, and here is what the first mum had to say. Liam is autistic with severe learning difficulties. At a disability tennis session we attended, we were aware that all of the children knew each other and we were joining an already established club. One of the club organisers, Alan Clark, approached me and gave me information on the Dumbartonshire Disability Sports Club. This was local to where we live, so we decided to give it a try. At the time, we were struggling to get Liam to engage with anything. He was a teenager struggling to fit in and connect with others. Most of the things we tried, he showed absolutely no interest in and wanted to leave after a short time. So when we arrived at the multi-sports club, Liam recognised some of the children he went to school with. And although he didn't join in, he didn't want to leave. The coaches constantly encouraged Liam to participate, and slowly he started to join in the activities. With the support from the coaches and other members of the club, he now participates in all of the sessions. Now, over the 2 years that Liam has attended the club, he's become more confident, more active, less isolated, he communicates more with the group, and he communicates more at home. On arriving at the multi-sport session on Saturdays, he runs from the car park into the sport hall in front of me and has joined in the activity before I even get into the hall. He now also attends the swimming sessions on Sundays and is enjoying learning to swim, and being part of the club has contributed to Liam being more confident when interacting with other groups, and he is more active and is more comfortable in trying to be part of new experiences. This is what Max's mum had to say. My son Max has learning difficulties and was very isolated and lacked confidence to take part in most activities, as he thought he was getting judged by other kids for his lack of ability to play games and sports. Max wasn't interested in sports and physical activity. But since joining the club in 2017, it's provided him with an environment where he feels comfortable and confident to take part in sport without feeling judged. He participates in the weekly multi-sport sessions and the weekly swimming sessions and loves to play football, because before joining the club, he would never kick a ball with other children. So his newly discovered confidence has resulted in him in trying after-school basketball, and he participated in a school football tournament earlier this year. His school has also seen a difference in his confidence and behaviour and awarded him with a Special Achievement Award for PE in May. The changes in Max's confidence have had a positive impact on our whole family, and we're also grateful for the work Dumbartonshire Disability Sports Club do for children in the community. Presiding Officer, you couldn't put it any better than what those two mums have said, really. Sports for disabled people is inclusive, it's empowering, it builds confidence. It helps participants and it helps their families. And it wouldn't happen without the volunteers like Alan Clark and the coaches who do so much to make sport accessible. Let's have more of it, please. That requires more support from every level of government, and not to be outdone by Fulton McGregor, let me invite the Minister, indeed both Ministers, to come visit Dumbartonshire Disability Sports Club.
Thank you, and I call Jenny Gilruth to be followed by Emma Harper. Jenny Gilruth.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Sport should be for everyone because, as the Minister mentioned in her opening speech, sport has the potential to change lives. And as the Scottish Disability Sport Report noted, 21% of the Scottish population have a disability. 7 in 10 disabled people want to take part in more sport and physical activity, yet only 2% of the coaching workforce and 8% of the club members report having a disability. The Scottish Government's Fairer Scotland for Disabled People Delivery Plan, which was published in 2016, notes 3 key actions in terms of sport. First of all, as Alison Johnson mentioned, disabled people's participation at all levels of sport and physical activity will increase through an action plan developed in partnership with disabled people. Secondly, Sport Scotland will invest in disabled people and athletes and ensure that the needs of disabled people and athletes are addressed through investment in Scottish disability sport, Active Schools Network, the 2018 Winter Olympics and the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. And thirdly, the focus has been on the creation of a new parasport facility for Scotland in Inverclyde with an investment of £6 million to promote the inclusion of disabled athletes in sport. As has previously been mentioned, in 2017, the First Minister opened the new National Sports Training Centre in Inverclyde. The £12 million redevelopment fund was supported by Sport Scotland and by the Scottish Government, partnership working with inclusion at its heart. As Fulton McGregor mentioned, the Scottish Football Association at a national level has led on the advancement of football opportunities for people with a disability since 2005. And in 2017, the SFA rebranded to para-football, which is regarded as more positive and empowering terminology from the negative disability. And since 2012, the SFA has educated over 6,000 coaches specifically within para-football education. Indeed, across the country, as we've heard today, more clubs are improving the ways they support inclusion for all athletes in sport. Last year, I was delighted to support local team Glenrothes Strollers FC as the club hosted their first Pan-Disability Football Festival. I met with club officials and the local football stalwart Joe McCafferty at the festival, which brought together over 120 young people from across Scotland to compete in the tournament. And Glenrothes Strollers have been working in partnership with the Scottish Football Association over the last 3 years, moulding the landscape of disability football in Tayside and Fife to establish 10 centres to allow people to access the sport. The club picked up the 2017 SFA Community Award in recognition of its efforts. Glenrothes is also home to the Disability Sport Fife headquarters at the Michael Woods Sports Centre. And DSF is a branch of the Scottish Disability Sport Organisation which began life back in 1977. In 2017, they celebrated 40 years as a disability sport lead body in Fife for children, athletes and players of all ages and abilities with a physical, sensory or learning disability. DSF lead the development of inclusive sport and active recreation for children, young people and adults with a physical, sensory or learning disability across the kingdom. DSF Fife have sent a Paralympian to every single Paralympic Games since 1992, and I spoke to para-athlete Stefan Hogan ahead of today's debate. Stefan is an ambassador for Disability Sport Fife and for Scottish Disability Sport, and he works to encourage young disabled people to get and start getting physically active. Stefan started swimming at age 3. He was born without a lower right arm and he took up para-triathlon training in 2015 after missing out on competing in the 2014 Commonwealth Games in swimming. He finished 6th in the WTE triathlon in Detroit. At 24, having represented Scotland for over 10 years, Stefan retired from professional sport and he now coaches the next generation of competitive swimmers at Carnegie Swimming Club. Stefan told me that it was only thanks to Disability Sport Fife's support he was able to be successful in sport in the first place. The organisation helped him to build his confidence and it allowed him to thrive in other fields, including, as some might know, politics. Nationally, Sport Disability Scotland has delivered over 100 disability inclusion training opportunities involving over 1,608 candidates. And SDS is training and working with over 15 universities and colleges to work towards embedding inclusion across tertiary education. Disability inclusion training has also been embedded within the curriculum delivery to all trainee PE teachers in Scotland. Presiding Officer, returning to Glenrothes, I'd like to highlight Stuart Padley, who's a member of the Royal Navy who recently competed in the Invictus UK trials. And Stuart has been supported by Help for Heroes following a stroke in 2018. He's set to take part in the Invictus Games in 2020. And commenting on what's yet to come, he said, taking part in the Invictus Games at The Hague next year will enable me to move forward my recovery and be part of a team with similar challenges. I have found that focusing on sports has helped immensely with my mental well-being and fitness. It has made me more determined than ever to carry on with the Invictus journey. Stuart's journey, much like Stefan Hogan's, has been all about the positive impact of sport on their lives. Despite what life has thrown both of these men, sport has been a pathway through which to hone their talents to the fullest. Fundamental in both of these journeys has been the support of partners, whether that be through Help for Heroes or Sport Disability Fife. A driving factor in both of these success stories has to have been that backing. And Stuart asked me to mention today his thanks to all military personnel, to Help for Heroes, his family and friends for all of their support that they've given him. Presiding Officer, the Scottish Government is working to ensure that sport is more inclusive for all, from investment in the National Parasport Facility to the work of Sport Scotland across Scotland. More clubs than ever before are now focused on developing inclusive practices when it comes to participating in sport. Grassroots football clubs like Glenrothes Strollers are playing a huge role in challenging discrimination in sport and enabling inclusion for all. In closing, Presiding Officer, I pay tribute to the work of the Glenrothes Strollers, to Sport Disability Fife and to Stefan Hogan. And finally, to Stuart Padley from Glenrothes, can I wish him the best of luck at the Invictus Games next year. Thank you.
Apologies for that interruption, Ms Gilruth, but you didn't miss a beat. The last of the open debate contributions is from Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I welcome the opportunity to speak in this important disability and participation in sport debate today. And I'd like to thank all the organisations and individuals who have sent briefings and testimonies ahead of the debate, including Sport Scotland. Presiding Officer, there should be no barriers to participating in sport in Scotland for anyone, regardless of ability, background, age or place. And as Deputy Convener of the Health and Sport Committee and in my South Scotland region, I'm aware through contact with people and organisations about some of the challenges that persons with disabilities do have when they choose to access sport and sporting activities. And these challenges range from poorly accessible sporting facilities, a lack of sporting teams for disabled people, and costs associated with purchasing sporting equipment. And we've heard from Fulton McGregor and Mary Fee and Alison Johnson that adequate accessible changing facilities are also a barrier to participation. And I'm pleased and I fully support the Minister's reference to tackling isolation and loneliness as an issue to be considered here today in this debate. And in attempting to better understand some of the barriers and challenges and put policies in place to improve participation, in 2016, Sport Scotland and the Equality and Human Rights Commission commissioned a research report into equality in Scottish sport. And the report looked at who currently participates in sport, the barriers to participation, and suggested potential solutions which would encourage participation in Scottish sport, particularly for less able or disabled people. The research is interesting. It found that in Scotland, persons with accessibility needs are less active, have poorer experiences of school PE, and are less likely to participate in sport as adults. It also found that disabled people are less likely to use leisure facilities, often because of stigma associated. But positively, the report did conclude that when people with disabilities do take part in sport and exercise, they're more likely to take part more frequently and commit to the sport or activity for longer periods. The question is, how can we help support people with disabilities to be in a position where they are able and confident to become involved with sport and physical activity? And I'm pleased that since the research study in 2016, the Scottish Government has proactively taken steps to improve participation and sport for people with disabilities into sport. The Scottish Government's A Fairer Scotland for Disabled People plan sets out ambitious plans for disability sport. It includes 3 actions on disability sport and is backed up with combined investment of over £37 million, delivering state-of-the-art sporting facilities across Scotland, funding for disability sporting clubs and groups, and access to training and education for sporting instructors. This is all very welcome, and I'm pleased that it has been congratulated by many sporting organisations. Presiding Officer, I'd like to highlight some of the fabulous disability sport groups across my South Scotland region who are breaking down barriers and encouraging people with disabilities into sport. Dumfries and Galloway Disability Sport, coordinated by Laura Vickers from D&G Council, helps to provide opportunities for people with a physical, sensory or learning disability to take part in sports or physical activity. They have numerous classes throughout the week, including football, judo, table tennis, the Splash Club and Iceability at the Dumfries Ice Bowl as a prep for wheelchair curling and skating. All the classes are well attended, and according to Laura, many families view the services provided as a lifeline to those taking part, allowing for socialisation, physical activity and contributing to a healthy mind, which again reflects back to the isolation and tackling loneliness mentioned by the Minister earlier. This year, D&G Disability Sport have entered a team to take part in the 2020 Special Olympics National Alpine Skiing Championships, and that's taken place in Switzerland from the 1st to 8th of February. And my colleague Joan McAlpin has done an excellent job describing the team and the alpine skiing plan. The team are really excellent, and I look forward to visiting them next year, and I wish them every success for their Olympics. Another sport worth highlighting is the Skiffy World's Coastal Rowing Championship, which was held this summer in Stranraer. The St Andrews team have made adaptations to their boats, their St Ailes skiffs, and they are now accessible for wheelchair users. And I know that Minister Joe Fitzpatrick is joining me for a St Ailes skiff row during Easter recess next year. So I welcome you to Stranraer, Minister Fitzpatrick. One more fantastic D&G sport to mention is that Dumfries and Galloway is the home to a slightly more unusual sport. It's called Tamborelli, which members may be aware of from my motion earlier this year. Tamborelli, invented in Newton Stewart in the 70s, is a shuttlecock court game which has since spread across the world, with small communities of players running active clubs in England, Scotland, Germany, Japan and Sweden. The aim of Tamborelli is for the team of 4 players to stop a shuttlecock from landing in the court on their side of the net. The players hitting the shuttlecock with a bat like a tambour, which is similar to a tambourine but without the bells, Presiding Officer. Tamborelli is completely adaptable for those with a disability, including wheelchair users. And this year, the World Championships were held in Newton Stewart with various teams, including wheelchair users. And I hope to join them in March when the season starts next year. Presiding Officer, in conclusion, I welcome this debate. I congratulate the Scottish Government on steps taken to improve disability sport, and I promote further participation. Thank you.
We now move to the closing speeches, and I call David Stewart for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I think this has been an excellent debate with very thoughtful and considered speeches from across the chamber. My only disappointment is that it's unfortunate that we were scheduled in this twilight zone slot, but I'm hopeful next year the business managers will put their heads together and have another debate in perhaps a more prime-time television slot for us all. I would say that I think first of all the Minister did set the tone with what I thought was a very positive and upbeat contribution, and I hope that doesn't ruin her future political career with a contribution from me. And a number of members, I thought, had first-class examples from their own regions and constituencies. Particularly, I'd like to mention Jackie Bailey and Jenny Gilruth, who both mentioned lots of first-class examples. And as other members like Mary Fee has mentioned, there was good timing. That Tuesday, as members will know, was the International Day of People with Disabilities. So this was good timing, and I'm sure the business managers had an eye to that particular aspect. So I suppose the truism that we all know is that participation in sport is good for health. And I've lost count how many long hours we have debated this issue in either the Chamber or in the Health and Sport Committee. And members, not least Brian Whittle, echoed that in his contribution. And as members know, Mr Whittle is an award-winning athlete in his own right. And as I've said before, I suspect he is faster in one running shoe than I am in two. But if people want to know the context, just go to the Moscow Olympics and look this one up. But as we've heard from many members, 52% of non-disabled people hit the recommended level of daily physical activity, compared with only 20% of those with a disability. And when you think that 21% of Scottish people have a disability, this number obviously is appallingly low.
Brian Whittle.
Thank the member for taking an intervention, and I will not talk about shoes. I've heard several contributions today talking about 1 in 5 people in Scotland having disabilities. Would it not be better for us to say 100% of Scots have abilities, and it's for up to us to try and match that ability to a pathway?
David Stewart.
Yeah, I agree strongly with the member. I was actually going to mention that in Mr Whittle's contribution earlier on. I think it is important as well that we do avoid labelling, and I think that's the point that the member is making. So what is clear from members' contributions across this chamber this afternoon is that we do need a more inclusive programme across the country to ensure everyone has the opportunity to get involved. The line I would use is that no one should be left behind. And of course, we've heard about the innovative organisations across the country. Many members have mentioned this, Presiding Officer, but could I just echo them? The Scottish Disability Sports Association, I think they do excellent work ensuring the philosophy of increased inclusion is translated into actions and practice. And Sports Scotland, I'd also like to mention, I think they're doing sterling work, focusing on several areas of inclusion, including young people from the most disadvantaged areas, women and girls, and particularly for this debate, young people with disabilities. And we've heard again from a number of members that half of those living in poverty are those with disability or families with disabled members. So it's no secret that poverty and inequality come with many health-restricting issues. So adding in a lack of physical activity is only going to make this worse. And we've heard, I think, from Alison Johnston about the issue that Sports Scotland research shows that once disabled people start taking part in sport and physical activity, they are just as likely to take part frequently as those without disability. So it's clearly the first step into access where the barriers are. Now, we've all talked about the barriers this afternoon. They can be social or personal. Physical accessibility has been touched on many occasions, transport, poverty, or lack of opportunity. And I'm very conscious of time this afternoon, I've just touched on a couple of points. Brian Whittle made the issue about the key is sport generally and team working and avoid labelling, as I touched on earlier. And I was touched with this issue that he mentioned about sport becoming the bastion of the middle classes. But there's other issues as well. There's the barriers created by rurality, which I know in my own region of Highlands and Islands, and particularly transport costs is a major factor. Mary Fee mentioned the really important issue about empowering those with disabilities, and setting up elite role models should represent those from all backgrounds and all abilities. One of the very pertinent examples Mary Fee gave was Riding for the Disabled, which both involves therapy, mobility and adding to confidence. And I thought also Alison Johnson made a very valid point that it is important to develop coaching, but also to develop those with a disability to be coaches. And this is an area obviously we need to do some more work to do, but this is certainly a vitally important area. So in conclusion, Presiding Officer, I believe that physical activity and social prescribing are vitally important to help us manage some disabilities. So going forward, I think we need to translate this obvious cross-party consensus for increased engagement for sport and people with disabilities into action. We need to increase physical and psychological vision and access to help people with disabilities have more opportunities to take part in sport and physical activity. And you would expect me to end with a quote, Presiding Officer. So, as Nelson Mandela said, sport has the power to change the world. Sport can create hope where there was once only despair. Thank you.
Now call Jeremy Ball for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I also congratulate all members on this debate? Can I also congratulate the Scottish Government and the business managers? But in fact, this is the third day in a row that we have had mention of disability. And I think that is really encouraging that is happening. We've had different contributions from different members. And I think it shows maybe the slight cultural change that we have now in society, that we can talk about disability in sport, disability in welfare, and disability in regard to employment. And I've really been encouraged this week, if not slightly overworked. I would also like to thank all the groups that have put in submissions for today's debate. I've found it really helpful in preparing for them, and I thank the Third Sector and other organisations that have done it. I want to, if I can, Deputy President Officer, pick up really on a comment made by Mary Fee and by others. And that is, how do we normalise disability sport? So we actually aren't talking about disability sport, we're just talking about sport. I don't often get to talk about sport, which is my great love, out with a few other things. But I was very fortunate being brought up perhaps in this middle-class family, but I was able to do lots of different sports. I learned to swim. I went to the Drum Riding Centre here in Lothian to learn to ride. I learned to ski, learned to play golf, and if I could just put in public record, that 30-foot putt will never be forgotten about by me in all my life. But I was a fortunate one, but I was able to learn all these things. But I was never going to be a Paralympian. I wanted to play sport because I liked playing sport. And I think there's a danger, and there's a danger even in the way that we talk in the chamber, that we highlight those who go on to represent us either at the Commonwealth Games, European, Olympics, or whatever. And that is absolutely great. But you don't say to the person in your street who goes to the local club to bowling, are you going to go to the Commonwealth Games and play bowling? And if you have a moment in the next couple of days on the election campaign, can I refer you to the BBC website, where there's a really interesting article by Hannah Dines, who was a Paralympian cyclist a couple of years ago. And she says, what really concerns me is that people are only inspired by what I do because I am disabled. In fact, she uses the word, I've become inspirational porn, which is really an interesting comment made by her. And I think there is a danger that we see sport as those who have achieved a high degree, rather than just saying, I'm going around to kick the football in the park with a few of my mates, or I'm just going to the local golf club, or I'm just doing whatever. And I actually think we will have reached that equilibrium that others have mentioned previously, when we simply say, oh, I hear Johnny or Jeremy is off to the local squash court or the tennis club, and we don't even mention his or her disability. And I think the way we do that, absolutely.
Brian Whittle.
To intervene in one of my own. I wonder, I totally agree, what we're looking at here is participation across all demographics. But I wonder if you'd agree with me that one of the great ways to get people involved in sport is to be able to see the pathway, to aspire. You have to be able to touch it, which is why perhaps we highlight the shop window, if you like, of international sport, and that's across the board, not just in disability.
I remember, to show my age, that when David Wilkie came along to our local swimming club, and we all got to get a photo taken with David Wilkie. And undoubtedly, you know, there was a great Scot, Edinburgh, who had won an Olympic gold medal. And that did, you know, maybe inspire us to go back and do a bit more swimming. So absolutely, we do need to have these showcase people. But please don't think just because you've got a disability and you play a bit of sport, you're going to go on and be a Paralympian. I mean, I think that is what the point I'm trying to make. And I think the way we do that is by putting our resources into the grassroots. And I think that is so important. And again, picking up Mary Fee and Alison Johnson and other comments, that comes down to just the basics of, do we have the right type of changing room in our sporting facilities? Can we get there with public transport? Can we have the financial backing to allow, as we've heard from other people, the money that you need to be able to hire that sports or ice rink or whatever? And so I absolutely accept we need inspirational models, but we also need to make sure that our resources are allocated appropriately into the grassroots, and that we see disability sport as sport like any other sport, and we enjoy it and we celebrate together. So in conclusion, Deputy Presiding Officer, I thank the Government for bringing forward this debate this afternoon. I think it has been inspiring. I think it has hopefully again raised the topic amongst our different political groups. I think there's a consensus here, and I think we can take that forward. And I do hope that one day, everybody who wants to play sport, whatever their ability or lack of ability, will be able to do that and enjoy it. Thank you.
I now call Joe Fitzpatrick to wind up the debate. 8 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm delighted to close today's debate on disability sport and participation, and thank members for their contributions from across the chamber, and particularly the way that we've had today's debate. I think it's not always the case that we agreed to have a debate without motion, but I think in a debate like today that it does give us all the freedom to contribute without any danger of becoming partisan and to really focus on what is a very important issue, highlighting just how important sport and physical activity is to people across Scotland, and how it can be used intentionally to bring about positive change for disabled people just like everybody else in society. In particular, I was encouraged by the ways in which organisations like others, organisations like Scottish Disability Sports and Sport Scotland, are working together to use the collective power of sport and physical activity to create positive, lasting change for disabled people. And Brian Whittle, I think, talked in his opening about the importance and potential of sport and physical activity in the preventative health agenda. And he is absolutely right. We know that physical activity is one of the very best things we can do, not just for our physical health, but for our mental health. And that, of course, goes for everyone, irrespective of ability or disability. A point also made by David Stewart. And I think that's why it's good that I think throughout the whole time of the Scottish Parliament, the sports portfolio has been part of the health portfolio. I think it's particularly good that it's within public health, because I do think as we're moving to a preventative approach, that is exactly the right place that it should be. Presiding Officer, Scottish Disability Sport have been a leader in this area for many years, and it's great to hear so many people talking about this. And I want to take this opportunity to join others in paying tribute to Janice Eaglesham, MBE. I had the pleasure of meeting with her to discuss the work of SDS, and I was so impressed not just by the activity that the SDS were delivering, but also her personal commitment and personal drive. And it just absolutely shone through. And we've heard others across the chamber who talking about that. And I know that her loss has been felt deeply within the entire sports community. But the work on disability sports activity that many sports governing bodies are now delivering can be seen as a fitting legacy of the important influence that she had on disability inclusion in sport in Scotland. And that's led to many... Yes?
Mike Rumbles.
A very consensual debate, but the issue that hasn't been tackled really is the Scottish Disability Sports Report. In their study, 47% of disabled people feared losing their benefits if they seem to be physically active. Now, it's a perception. What can the Scottish Government do to change that perception?
Joe Fitzpatrick.
I think it's a very important point that the member and other members in the chamber, I think at least 3 other members in the chamber made, and I think that is absolutely about the type of society we have and the type of welfare system. And I certainly hope as we are developing our social security system in Scotland, then that should not be the fear. People taking an action which is, I think some people in the medical profession would say that if you could turn physical activity into a pill, you would call it a miracle cure. I'm clearly misquoting, but it's words to that effect. So clearly, if we have a way of making people's health better, then surely we should be encouraging people to take that action rather than making them be afraid of losing their benefits. In terms of the work that has gone on, there has been many examples of para-athletes achieving success. Alison Johnson mentioned the wheelchair curlers who on home ice in Stirling were inspirational in the World Championships in March. And I was really pleased that I was able to visit the National Curling Academy in Stirling and heard firsthand about the development in Scottish curling are making to make sure that they are all-inclusive. I even managed to have a go, and I was told I was not too bad, given it was the first time I'd tried curling. I tried it in both ways, using the stick and also on the ground, and I was told I wasn't too bad. So.
David Stewart.
Did the member feel when he was curling it was a bit like his political career? He was on thin ice a lot of the time.
I'm pleased to confirm that the ice arena in Stirling is very, very firm ice. That was great. There's lots of other examples, of course. Neil Fashy in cycling, Tony Shaw in swimming. So many fantastic examples of people who have been real advocates for disability sports. And I think Brian Whittle is right that it is important that we have those examples to encourage people, and we all need examples. So we're particularly pleased in terms of the work that's going on in women's sport, how that's encouraging more girls and women to get involved in it. I think it's right that people with disabilities can also see role models. But Mike Rumbles and others were also right in saying that we need to also focus our efforts on all levels of participation, not just that elite end. So I was pleased to hear Jackie Bailey, Emma Harper, Jenny Gilruth and others waxing lyrically about the fantastic work that is going on in so many parts of Scotland. And that's really good. Jeremy Balfour, in his closing, I think raised a really important question, which a few folk had been touching on. How do we normalise disability sports? And the fact that 1 in 5 people have a disability is the fact that many people with disability find it more difficult to access sport is a fact. And so how do we balance that normalising while still challenging those barriers? And I think in an ideal world, we would just say 100% of people have ability, but we need to recognise that people with disabilities have additional challenges. So that is why Jimmy is quite right that it's appropriate that we have the discussions that we've had all this week in this important week, but also talk about where there are some really good examples of where we've managed to put disability sports on a pedestal at the highest level. One example was at the Scottish Open this year, when the Edgar Golf didn't just compete at roughly the same time. They competed on exactly the same course. And my goodness, if you haven't seen an Edgar Golf contest, then I would really encourage it. It was absolutely thrilling, and just as thrilling as the Scottish Open that then went on after. It is really important that we recognise the amazing partnerships that are going on right across Scotland. One such partnership that I want to highlight is the partnership between Scottish Disability Sport and Spirit 2012 Trust. So together they've been delivering the Get Out, Get Active programme, focused on getting some of the least active people, disabled and non-disabled people, moving through fun and inclusive activities. I see time is tighter than I'd hoped. Alison Johnston and David Stewart both mentioned coaching, and Scottish Disability Sport also runs the UK Disability Inclusion Training Course, which helps participants with the tools that they need to help teach sport for disabled people. And that's a really important programme which there's been is going from strength to strength. Fulton McGregor, Jenny Gilruth, Tom Mason all talked about football, and football clubs, we all know, are a powerful force for good in our communities. As Fulton McGregor mentioned, the Scottish FA launched the world's first ever affiliated National Association for Para-Football earlier this year. So Scottish Para-Football brings together 9 different organisations governing various styles of para-football in Scotland, bringing together Amputee Football Association, Football Memories, Frame Football Scotland, Team United, Scottish Power Chair Football Association, Scottish National Cerebral Palsy Football Team, Scottish Mental Health Football Association, Scottish Deaf Football Association, Scottish Pan Disability Football. Some fantastic examples, all under one umbrella, and an example to other sports. And I know that other sports are all working really hard to look at how they can follow that kind of example. I want to very quickly touch on a visit I made to Ireland recently, when I wanted to talk about some of the work that they're doing in Ireland, and challenging some of the barriers that we have we've already talked about. So in Ireland, they developed a Scottish Sports Inclusion Disability Charter, where disabled people who are both active and inactive were asked about their experiences, challenges and needs in relation to their participation in sport and physical activity. And from the vast feedback received, the Sport Inclusion Disability Charter was developed. The Charter commits sport in Ireland to be open to an understanding of all people with disabilities, to access training for our people to facilitate the inclusion of people with disabilities, develop and deliver inclusive activities, renew facilities, venues, equipment to make organisations more accessible, and to promote the inclusive nature of our activities in a variety of forms. In coming to a close, Presiding Officer, the reason I wanted to focus on that is because I think if we're going to tackle some of the barriers, then it can't be left to government, it can't be left to sports development in Scotland. We need this to be across the board, bringing our sports governing bodies who are doing some really good work, but it's really important that we work together to encourage all of that good work. I've got so many more things that I wanted to say, so I apologise for not having covered all of the points, but it's been a really good debate, and I thank everyone who's contributed. I think this is an area where, as a Parliament, we can work together to make sure that we make real progress with people with disabilities, to make sure they can benefit from sport and physical activity the same as everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that concludes our debate on sport, disability and participation. And now I am minded to accept a motion without notice to bring forward decision time till now, unless anyone objects. Could I ask Maurice Golden on behalf of the Bureau to move such a motion? Thank you very much. So the question is that decision time be brought forward to now. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. And on that note, I can confirm that there are no votes or decisions to be taken. So I will close this meeting.